I'm Gavin Goodvac. I'm Head of Content at Vexigo. First of all, happy Thursday. Thanks for everyone coming in to see us today. It's actually a good day, and it's really great to see everybody. We're actually a large ad network based out of Israel. We do high-frequency trading of both video and display advertising, and my part of the company is to start using that reach, that targeted reach, to offer new products to brands and advertisers to engage in creative and unique ways with their audience.
Hey everybody, I'm David. I'm the CEO of Masterclass. Out of the people here, I'm just curious, have any of you ever taken an online class? And how many of you have finished an online class? All right, so our kind of hypothesis was that we could A, expand how many people take online classes, and B, actually improve how many people actually finish an online class. So we offer online classes from the absolute best in the world. So example is, if you want to take an acting class, why don't our first acting class is taught by Dustin Hoffman. Or our photography class is taught by Annie Leibovitz. And as a result, we are expanding how many people are taking online classes, and people actually finish our classes. So that is what we do at Masterclass.
I'm Andrew Sachs. I am the CEO of Weave, which is a social video conversation app. It's mobile only, and it's face-to-face conversation where we string together short videos into endless streams of conversation. And people around the world are able to meet, connect, engage, have fun.
And last but not least,
my name's Philip Nelson. I am the Chief Relationship Officer at NewTek. We are a technology company that basically we're the first people to do television on a computer back in the 90s, early 90s, and we also have a product called TriCaster, which is a TV truck in a box. Our clients are doing 250,000 hours of video a month, which is quite a lot of video, and we're now really expanding into the enterprise market, and 80 of the Fortune 100 companies are now using our tech. Last piece of propaganda is we just released a partnered product with Microsoft called TalkShow, which is a broadcaster's interface for Skype, and you can see it in action on Neil Patrick Harris's Best Time Ever on NBC. If you've seen the live karaoke hidden camera segment, that's all TalkShow, NewTek, and Microsoft. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for introducing yourself. So we have a great panel, and we have experience from various areas, and we want to start by talking about innovation. If my projector allows me to switch, which is not doing. So the first thing is, what are the new things that are coming up? We have seen that streaming platforms have matured, and they have changed, and they're much more than just streaming platforms. We have seen that vision recognition and augmented reality are changing the way games are being thought out, but not only games, the way we do advertisement, the way we bring ideas, and the way that we look at print media. We see the virtual reality, after a long wait, is finally about to launch the consumer versions of Oculus and other platforms on the first quarter of 2016, or at least that's what they said. But there is a lot of things that are exciting, and part of it starts with the experience of what we can do that is new. So I think that innovation starts when we decide that we want to shoot a video. And if we were going to cover a live event years past, we would probably need a truck park outside the arena, and a couple dozen people, and camera operators, and specialists, and a switchboard, and whatnot. But things have changed. So to get us started, let's talk a little bit about how we do a live event now with something like the TriCaster, or the things that you have been doing, Philip.
Okay. I talk loud, but just since the recording, I'll grab the mic. You know, things have totally changed. You know, television has been democratized. You know, the power used to be in the hands of people with millions of dollars worth of equipment, and now anybody with a good idea can make a show. In 1985, our founder was quoted. He said, in the next 20 years, your favorite TV show will be made by you or someone you know. And with YouTube and the access that everyone has to distribution now through the internet, that we're here in that time that anybody can be a broadcaster. So the way the workflow has changed considerably is the technology is allowing, of course I prefer everyone use a TriCaster, but even with anyone with a laptop can now become a broadcaster if they want to do single camera with some simple graphics. I think one of the biggest advances that's made live TV really accessible is camera technology has become so cheap, and they can handle low lights so well now. You don't have to have really, really hot lights, LED lights, and some cameras. I may be tangenting here, but the cost of entry is nothing. If you have a good idea, you can make the show and do it with a very small team and test an idea. I mean, I think in the broadcast industry, the clients we work with, that's one of the most exciting things is that, in the past, if they had an idea that they wanted to test and it didn't succeed, someone was getting fired because it would cost so much to do that test. Now they can just try anything, and if it's successful and sponsors get behind it, shows get greenlit. I mean, with MTV, we did a long time ago the Hills After Show Party. So that was the #1 show at the time on MTV. And they said, how do we monetize our audience twice? We're getting them on linear television, and let's bring them to MTV.com the minute the show's over. And they had millions of teenage girls flocking to MTV.com. And next thing you know, sponsors are throwing money at an idea that everyone thought was crazy.
That's a great start, David. You've been also shooting video recently for your master classes.
Yeah.
What can you share? What can you add to what Philip just shared with us?
Yeah, I mean, our idea was that most online classes, if you look at them, are filmed with a webcam in the back of a classroom, right? So what if you took somebody who's actually won an Oscar and actually tried to get them to actually film a class, right? And so we got guys like Jay Roach to shoot the classes, and our classes do look like they would in a movie, right? But I gotta say, maybe because I come from the tech world, I actually think it's still expensive to put high quality video up there. So, I mean, we still use crews and folks. Expensive crews. I think the cost has dropped. I think compared to other areas of tech, it's still expensive to actually create a show. And even if you can film it on your own to get eyeballs and money, it is still. I think we're still at the start of the curve as cost is dropping.
I'd like to add one more thing. I mean, and you really hit the nail on the head. Anybody can make a show with a webcam, but when you make a show that looks like network television, it has more credibility to the viewer. The average person at home, my kids are all television experts. They were raised watching TV. They know what TV is supposed to look like. And so if you're a CEO doing a presentation, or you're, Annie Leibovitz doing a photography class, everybody respects her, but if it looks like garbage, that's the value that the viewer has. And the costs are coming down. One little story I'll share, and then I'll pass it on because I tend to talk too much. The Horizon League is an NCAA conference, and they wanted to get on. They wanted to do more games. They had a budget, and with that budget, they could afford to do 8 to 10 live sporting events a year. That's all they could afford. So they would pick which schools got those events, and they would try to get schools in the conference that could play each other so they're both getting airtime. And then they deployed our technology, and with the same budget, they went from 8 to 10 events a year to 400. And they created their own network called the Horizon League Network. And because of that success, the NCAA took notice and started rolling this out to others. So, but the key is it has to look like television, because if you don't, you're losing the credibility of your message.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the expectation bar of the quality has definitely risen, right? If you now watch almost anything, it actually looks great. I think the things that are I think are going to change fastest and that we are starting to see is the change in structure. So if you think about it, I think binge watching has killed the episode. Like you actually see now why are shows stuck in a structure of half an hour, and you'll start to see if you actually look at like the time on Netflix, you now have things that like only go for, under half an hour or over half an hour, and there's kind of not, and they are not bound by to fit into an X amount of time. And it's really kind of fast. It's really kind of exciting to think about what if I could write a story that it actually peaks and ends at 12 minutes, right? And why am I stuck with to do an actual full-length show. So we will see with our classes, we actually saw in testing that after about 12 minutes, you actually lose focus and you can't pay attention. So we actually make sure that every one of our lectures actually gets capped and split over.
Yeah, I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but I think you'll probably remember a few years ago, Jeffrey Katzenberg said that he offered something like $25 million for the guys from Breaking Bad to produce another 6 episodes, and of course they didn't take it, but his proviso was that they allow him to cut those episodes up into 12-minute chunks and serialize it 1 episode every day. Now I heard this from him at MIPCOM in France, but it's an amazing world where Jeffrey Katzenberg wants to cut up Breaking Bad into 12-minute chunks, but I think it's an interesting innovation in storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and we're going to circle back to the issue of time, because one of the things that has changed the most is user patterns. So, but innovation is not just in the creation part. There is innovation also in the way that we distribute and make content available for users. So we have, for example, Ari or Wes, I don't know, Ari, perhaps you can get it started. You guys have platforms that allow people to see all of this great content that Philip and David were talking about. So what can you tell us of the difference now of how platforms and how making content reach consumers is versus what it used to be, that just a video streaming cloud?
So first of all, not to fully dissent from everything that was just said, but
you guys are all idiots.
but it really depends.
I hear that a lot. Sorry.
It really depends on what kind of content you're talking about. For example, we're dealing a lot with the Twitch world. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's a video game streaming website where people watch other people play video games. More people watch Twitch than who watch CNN. So it's pretty significant. And these are extremely low budget streams. What I'm talking about is people are casting their video game console. They might have a device that also shows themselves kind of in front of it, and they're interacting with their audience. These are very cheap to create, and the view times on average are upwards of 45 minutes. So it's pretty astounding, right? So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your audience, what's the format of your content, how professional is it supposed to look. I think for a lot of the Twitch audience, it's really about authenticity. They don't need the polished product. They just want that engagement with the creator. So,
can I ask what it is about that content that makes people watch it for so long? What is it? What are they? What's the draw in there?
So what's the draw on people watching sports?
So that's what it is. It just feels like I don't know, because I have no experience in this. It just feels like a sports event.
Well, it's kind of the same thing where when you watch someone play sports, maybe you played when you were younger, and there's sort of this aspirational thing. Wow, they're really good. I know how good they are, and you kind of take pride in kind of knowing the intricacies of what it took to pull that move off or that play. Mm-hmm. In other cases, it's just kind of entertainment. Actually, 40% of all the esports viewership is pure spectator. Really? So they don't even play the games. And I think that has...
Answer that question that was raised just briefly for 20 seconds.
Yes, we're going to have questions at the end of the
That's not a
panel,
question,
but
that was just the answer to the question that was asked.
20 seconds.
The reason is that people that are watching it see other people that they're not as good as they are. They see that they're even lower than they were, about the same level if they were playing that game.
All right.
Could be. There's a variety of reasons that people want to watch that, but the point is that from the way that we approach it at Maestro, what we're trying to do is take the creator and empower them to control more of the experience and the engagement components with the audience. So instead of sending your audience to YouTube or to Twitch, You have your own destination that you're always going to own, where you can establish your own direct-to-consumer relationships. So you actually collect email addresses. You can control, do like polls and engage people. You can also bring a lot of the sponsor integration into the experience, which is particularly big for esports. It's actually very difficult to do your own deals around video for live streams right now because there's not a lot of inventory that's available for you to sell. So really what we're looking at is creating these white label channels that the content creators own, that are branded like them, that they can send people to, that are, even if YouTube goes down or Twitch comes up or some other service comes up, it doesn't really matter. You have your destination where you're sending fans to. And you have this real-time toolkit to create that engagement, which is going to increase the view time. It's very different from like television, extremely different.
And Wes, you have also a platform. You want to add something to that?
Yeah. I mean, we have a streaming platform, so we enable our clients to do all kinds of different things. The goals are always different, whether it's an ad agency or an artist or something like that. But the digital landscape, as everyone knows, is quite different, and the Generation Ys and Zs are, they expect the content, they expect to engage with it in different ways that are more interactive, and they can actually influence or change kind of what's going on. And talking about sports, we did a campaign for Bud Light for Monday Night Football, where people would go onto ESPN.com and see this live streaming ad banner, and the interaction part was actually a gantry robot system above these two actors, kind of watching the game, farting around, drinking Bud Light. And but as a viewer, you could go and you could vote for whichever team you liked, if it was the Dolphins or whatever. And every 50 votes or 100 votes, this robot would go and do some kind of interaction, some kind of Bud Light superstition. So 1 week it would drop a coin, or it would break a board, like knock on wood, or dump popcorn on. It was all silly. It was all based on what the social media was driving. But yeah, I think it's really about sort of letting the audience interact and really be a part of the content, rather than just like a lean back kind of experience where it's more passive.
So thank you. So I want to show you guys a chart. Hopefully, if the projector collaborates, and it's not. So let's see. It won't work. Anyway, the chart that I have, it shows that most people give you about 10 seconds when they're watching a video to decide whether they move forward to something else or they're actually going to stick with you. And that brings, to one of the comments that Gavin had made, that the time, it depends on what you're doing, but you have to be, the content has to be clear, it has to be good, it has to capture you. And it can be because it's quality, not necessarily. It can be because of what is being said or what is being shown. So, for example, Andrew here has Weeb, has a platform that has that community social ingredient to it. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit of what you're doing at Weeb, because I think it'll be really interesting as we're talking about short attention span and user participation and all that.
Yeah, so interestingly, short attention span is the opposite of my problem. I'm trying to get people to use their app a bit less because they burn out, they get addicted. And I very much agree with what Ari is saying, that on one hand, there's this incredible Hollywood resurgence of amazing content, and I mean, almost too much of it, can't decide what to watch. And I have my average user using it about 45 minutes a day. And we had this interesting thing we never planned for, where our users started creating scripted content together. So I had one, a guy in Egypt, a woman in Atlanta, and another woman in Texas get together, figure out a time, and do a whole kind of scripted thing in costume and everything else. And when they were done, people could jump on and talk about it. And it's the quality is incredible because they're holding a very powerful camera this far from their face, and it's face-to-face conversation. And so they are, as whatever they can think of in the moment, or whether they plan it ahead of time by themselves with others, they can do these incredible, we call them performance weaves. Didn't plan for it, didn't expect it, they started doing it. And we have this amazing content. We now have enough content to fill a television channel for, a week easily. And they have fun doing it, and in part because you're looking at the person in front of you and you get to know them and you've had a conversation with them. Or at the end of it, you can go, oh, that was amazing. What were you thinking about? It's changing everything. And so people are spending a lot of time engaging with content, video content, in a way that has never been possible. And for us, what that's doing is it's changing the tone. So in the social media world, everyone talks about trolls. And for us, we don't have that because it's your face. Really hard to say you're an idiot or whatever, some horrible thing when you're talking to someone in the face. And instead, when someone's, we've had people get on there and go, I feel depressed, I feel suicidal, or I'm getting bullied at school or whatever, and they're getting too much support almost. It's like person after person after person come and they support them. So on one hand, we have people using video to create amazing content that you just want to view, that's, as far as the user is concerned, as good as anything they're going to get in television. A different level of quality. They're not expecting the lights, the sets, or any of that stuff, but it's fun to watch. And on the other hand, they're getting friendship, support. We've had people meet and get married. And then we did a wedding that half the people were in one place together, and the rest were spread out around the world. Poor guy in, again, Cairo, same guy, had to stay up until like 5 in the morning to participate in this wedding. And they said, who has the rings? He's like, I do. Passes them to, a woman in Sweden who takes them out of the camera and passes them, and you see the rings work their way around the world. So the technology, thanks to the phone, the chips, the camera, has enabled people to do all kinds of things. And the limit is, I think you said, is now the imagination.
So I think that what is interesting is because we have a lot of representatives here from a lot of technologies, but what is really fascinating is that at a basic level, it comes down to communication. And I think the reason why a lot of the businesses that our panelists are handling are successful is because they all excel at communication. And towards that end, I want to capture the thoughts from Nathan and Gavin, who have two very different businesses, but they're both very much engaged in communication. So Nathan, you work with the Hollywood Reporter publication we have all known for a number of years. Give me your take on communication and how things are shaking or shaping up or changing for you from what was purely a print media to a fully digital video oriented type of situation.
Sure. So what's interesting is, as we talk about innovation, I think mobile obviously is driving a lot of this. When people used to present video content, you would, when it was desktop driven, you would really get hit over the head. You're in the video experience now, and you'd have to learn how to navigate inside a video channel. It was entirely different from how would you tell other stories. And so we're aiming towards something that looks common and familiar. And when we do new designs, they often look just like an article template. So it may not seem innovative, but our opportunities in video are actually making video smaller, as you talked about, and weaving that inside the story almost like a pull quote. So, when you do a presentation, this is our new video type, it might not actually look very innovative, but it actually is, and it's much more effective.
Okay, thank you. And Gavin, you come at it from a very different perspective because you have a network that actually helps us make money. But it used to be, and I heard on the other session, that people do just media buys and just randomly throw banners everywhere, and we know that that's not the case anymore. So how, tell me a little bit about communicating from a marketing perspective, and Nathan, I think it's interesting also to share about the video recommendations and stuff,
Sure.
How to get, if you get somebody to watch something, to watch the next thing that is going to capture them. But Gavin, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't know whether this is going to actually exactly answer your question, but
That's okay.
I've been fortunate enough to work with one of Israel's leading venture capital funds for about 9 years with different companies that I was part of. And when it comes to innovation, the question is always, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then what makes your solution different to any other solution who's out there. And that works across the board, whether it's technology or whether it's creative, right? Everyone wants to develop their own creative voice. And in the ad tech side that we're part of, there are a lot of people, if anyone's ever seen the Lumascape, you can see there's a lot of people in ad tech. But what we're trying to do is always find new types of inventory, new places to put, let's say, native advertising, but I prefer to say, like non-disruptive advertising. And so one of the things we're concentrating on, one of the things that I like to think about is to try and find those places where we can innovate in terms of new types of inventory that aren't banners and aren't pre-rolls and stuff like that, which people can actually want to consume. So part of that's creative, obviously, making the advertising less selling and more story-based. And if I can just recommend to anyone to go to the YouTube channel of, American Express that do some amazing stuff, or Driscoll's that also do some really, really good branded content. I mean, this is the future. This is the innovation of advertising, and then putting it in places like, for example, in a virtual reality environment, or in a different kinds of mobile applications that our company's inventing, which we won't go into. I mean, that's where the innovation is, and obviously the problem is people don't like advertising. People don't like pre-roll advertising. And I just have to say, just one more thing. I don't want to be hypocritical. That's a lot of what we do, okay? It's a lot of what we do personally. But I want to make sure to say that as you look forward, if you want a business that survives 5-10 years out, this is where the innovation has to be. It's in the things that I've just described, I think. That's my opinion.
I completely agree with that. And so advertisement definitely is changing, and it is a very interesting time because the technology is changing too. Now, Nathan, you have a destination. A lot of people come to the Hollywood Reporter for news and for a variety of things. I just want to take a minute to talk about this. Once you get somebody to watch something, what are the things that you guys are doing to try to capture and build up on that moment that this person is giving you beyond the 10 seconds?
Yeah, well, I think it always makes sense to model things off of TV. TV has been incredibly effective as a medium, forever and ever. And so whether it is a video or even if it's a story or a photo gallery, that's why people who are effective in publishing, you're seeing like the content never stops. So whether it's infinite scroll in a story or an endless photo gallery, but particularly with video, like the video should never stop playing, and even borrowing from television to do like a next up, as we were talking about, like sometimes it's that 10, 15, 20-second mark that you could lose someone, and once you've lost them, you've lost them. So cueing them that there's another episode that's going to come up after this. Those are pretty straightforward things, and they look familiar, but anybody who's ever been a couch potato knows all you have to do is turn the TV on and it doesn't stop playing, and we're trying to do those things on the web or on the phone too, so you don't actually require someone to take an action to see more content.
Yeah, I think actually if you've been watching any series on your computer, you'll notice now that the next episode starts loading as soon as the credits start rolling.
Yeah.
And if you do nothing, that next episode comes up immediately without hesitation.
YouTube actually made an announcement about, or well, not really an announcement, but they were describing the fact that, despite the billions and billions of hours or whatever of content that there is on YouTube, people still have trouble figuring out what to watch. And that now content programming is going to become much more important as things develop. And you can kind of tell also they do the autoplay thing now on YouTube. I think that was like a few months ago. But that's something that we really think a lot about, is this idea of a lean back experience. That's why TV is so effective. You don't have to think about what really you're doing there, and content is just fed to you. And I think the way that everything's kind of moving is, we trust certain entities to curate that content for us. And as our tastes become more niche and niche and niche, these channels are going to start to appeal to more niche and niche audiences and have this sort of autoplay method where the community is there kind of hanging out, chatting around whatever their interest is. And I think that's the way that television, if you look at it from the beginning, we kind of had like a couple waves. The first wave was we had 4 channels on TV. Right? Then we moved to hundreds of channels. Now we have thousands of channels. I think we'll move kind of further in that direction as the tastes become more nuanced And those audiences that used to be maybe small are now huge on a global scale when you combine that global audience in one location.
What's interesting about that is that it seems to be it's more algorithm based rather than editor based, right? If you like this show, Netflix now knows that you're likely to like these other shows, even though the content may be completely different. And that is what engages us, as opposed to an expert saying, if you like this show, you're gonna like this show just like it.
And it's evolving, because I remember years past the recommendations. It's like, what? I don't like that.
Yeah.
But now it's getting to the point that is a little spooky at times. But it's about communication, but it's also about personalization. It really eventually is going to be about talking to an individual. And so, David, with your classes and master class, you have a class that it is pre-recorded, but it has a great deal of involvement of the users. Can you talk a little bit about the community and social aspect of a class that it is pre-recorded and yet has these components that you would normally associate with a live event?
Yeah. I mean, a big obstacle that we had was when you go to a class, there is some intimacy between you and the instructor, right? And you and the other classmates, right? And so on the instructor side is probably the hardest for us, right? Because how do I create a bond between you and Usher, right? When I'm trying to get as many people as I can to take an Usher class. And so we do a few things. One, what we used, I don't know if anybody has ever heard of this, it's called an iDirect. Does anybody know what an iDirect is? So an iDirect is, how should I say, most of the time, if you watch an interview, you'll see that the person's eyes actually aren't looking straight at the they aren't looking straight at the lens. They're often looking just off, right? And that's because they're trying to talk to an actual person. And iDirect puts actually like a bunch of mirrors in front of the camera. So what it does, it allows them to talk to somebody, but it looks like they're talking straight at you. And it's a really small effect, but we actually did lots of testing. And if you see this, it's actually like eerie, right? It's actually like I'm at my computer and Usher is talking just to me, and it builds this intimacy, right? So that's a small thing that we did that we did on the instructor side. We also found that people actually get almost as much out in school out of their classmates than out of an instructor. So we do everything from you have to do work in the class and do different projects, and other people in the class then actually kind of rate it and grade it. We then make it that the instructor then kind of acts as like a I'm trying to give an example. So for Dustin's class, he has everybody in the class do a scene from Jerry Maguire, and he has them do a scene, and they all film it, and it's actually pretty high quality. They then have everybody in the class look at it, and then Dustin actually decides to look at a few of the scenes, and Dustin then writes his own thoughts. So you're trying to create an interaction where you're interacting with other people in the class, and then it's also with kind of the prize that you might have a chance to get feedback from an actual instructor. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
That's okay. Andrew, and it doesn't get any more social or communication or personalized than in your platform. Tell me a little bit about the process. Somebody starts, a Weave start. Has that shaped then into a group or a community?
See, this was an interesting thing for us. When we started, we thought we were going to be a Q&A app. What should I wear today? I'll wear that. 10, 20 responses long. I never thought people would watch thousands of responses. And what happened for us is that we had a whole bunch of people come in, and they started playing games together because that was easy. It was gateways kind of stuff. So someone says, find me a, phone. And someone goes, oh, here's a phone. Okay, find me a light. Great. And you're looking at someone face to face. And then someone says, oh, I have a light just like that. And then a conversation starts. And then what we found is that people were meeting each other. They're looking each other in the eyes, you were saying, and they're like, oh, I know you now. And as we do many games, as conversations break out, we start to really get to know each other. So I come back every night. And because, it just goes from one weave to the next weave to the next weave, it's kind of that Netflix effect where, like, there's always something to engage you and somebody. And back in the day, you would have your TV friends, the show you watch. You feel like you know that person. And if you see that actor in the supermarket, you feel like you know them, and they have no idea who you are. And suddenly, what's happening with us is you're getting your TV friends, your Weave friends, but you're talking, you're back and forth to each other, and conversations go on for a great deal of time. And so that was a huge change for us. And that's why I talk about the troll effect going away. It's not a one-way push. All social media has basically been, I push out, do something creative, do something awesome, sit back, collect the likes, right? Great. And suddenly Weave is about engagement. It's about conversation. It's about what we do all the time, every day, all day. Sometimes we joke. Sometimes we cry, sometimes we drink, we do all these different types of things. And what we found was that people were using Weave to have these kind of conversations. And then we had to start building or adapting our app to the way our users were using it. And that was conversation. And I think it brings back something that disappeared with that kind of 50s ideal of small town life of, you know everybody in your little community, and then it kind of blew apart into the suburbs, and now suddenly the phone allows me to have a conversation with people in a very deep, very intimate way, and for them it became addicting. And sorry.
I was going to ask, are you having to cap the size of the group interaction? Like we have found that our classes, it's much better to cap them in terms of the size of your cohort, that you'll get more interaction if it's a tighter group, even if there's lots of groups?
So yes and no. On one hand, any individual weave can go on for whatever length, and if too many people get involved, just like if you're at a party and too many people, it breaks off. On the other hand, what we had is a super cohort form. Bunch of people came in about a 2-week period. They fell in love with each other. They got to know each other really, really well. 2 people got married, and a number of people started dating. None of them lived in the same state. And all these relationships formed. And then new people came in. And it's like, you're a college, you're a senior with all of your friends in college, and the freshman comes in and goes, hey, let's drink. And you're like, yeah, go away. So our existing people were kind of driving away the new people, and that became a real problem for us. We had to make it less internally viral. We had to be able, our whole thing became cohort plus one. We know how to build a cohort, but a cohort can only get so big.
So not to cut you short, but I think it's something that is really interesting about all of the experiences that you guys are sharing is the impact that video has. I have this quote that James McQuivary of Forrester Research says that 1 minute of video has the value of 1.8 million words. In context, that's approximately 3,600 pages. And that's really amazing because if we go back to our 10 seconds, that's 360 pages. That's a lot. So, and I didn't mean to cut you off because I want to circle back to this. So, again, it's about communication and it's about personalization, but it's also about the tools. You have to be agile. You have to be able to get things recorded or film or set up for a live event. And that brings us to live event and events that are pre-canned and combining them. So I don't know, Philip, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you have observed or what you can share about combining live events and pre-canned events. Is that something that can be done like with your technology?
Well, the timing is everything, and especially when you're doing international events, a lot of times people time shift. I don't really have a lot to say on that other than, it's great now that you do have the technology that you can produce a live show, but instead of broadcasting it live, do it live to drive. Like we did this big show with Jerry Lewis in Vegas, and it was his 87th birthday or something, and that's what they did. They shot it multicam, treated it as if it was a live television event, and they switched it. And actually, the guy that directed it is sitting in the back of the room, Bob Williams. Let's hear it for Bob Williams, everybody. And, you know, they did a line cut, and it sped up the process, and, you know, they time shifted it, and now it's aired on PBS 500-something times. But, you know, the timing didn't make sense to just do a live single event, but, you know, that's really all I have to say, sorry. I got bored with my answer, so
That's okay.
I got my ADD kicked in, and I just stopped.
That's okay. We can come back to that. But Ari, for
Yeah.
example,
I can speak to this a little bit.
when we spoke on the phone, we did a demo on the fly, and you were showing me a trailer. I think it was for Assassin's Creed, and right there and then you were able to interact with it in real time and react to what I was looking at. So let's talk about that, because that brings the live component to something that was pre-recorded and I could have been watching just linearly.
Sure. So, a bunch of things to say about this. First is that most brands today, they go back and forth between like live and not live. And right now there's different platforms that you use for those things. So you'll send your fans to one place for one and one place for the other. And that can be kind of like fragmented, particularly for your audience. So some of the things that we look at are, for example, how do you turn on this TV effect that we were talking about earlier, where you have kind of a mesh of live and pre-recorded content that you control. So that also gives you the ability to rebroadcast things at different times so that they appear live. Or even when you're not really doing it that way, you can take any content and just sync it up, the distribution. So if people just jump onto the channel, we even take YouTube content, any old content, and make it so that people are watching together all the time. So we have a customer, for example, they're big in the electronic music world, and they just curate great music video content, kind of like what MTV used to be. And you can go in there and you can hang out with other people who are watching all the newest music videos, and you're chatting with them, and sometimes the conversation's not even about the video anymore. It's just the community talking, you know, with each other while they're listening to what's playing or watching what's playing. It's kind of like hanging out with your friends on the couch. Right? You might not be talking at all about what's on the TV. It's kind of like the background to your engagement, your conversation together. So it's really interesting to see these different modes. A lot of what we deal with is kind of like mass broadcasts. Like we want the biggest attendance possible. So it's really about you know, the fans are chatting with each other and all that. But then the broadcaster we call them the maestro. It's actually why the company's called that. Is because they're able to kind of maestro the experience, curate it on the fly, so they can, you know, we had an example this past weekend for the music festival in Amsterdam, where they asked, you know, what should the host do next? Should he take a shot or go talk to these girls, or, you know, go in the back room or something? And people were like voting in the poll, and then that happened next, right? Like in the real world. And then later they rebroadcasted that interaction, so people saw how the audience that was watching at the time affected it. So it's really, I don't know, all these different kinds of use cases that just depend on, you know, the kind of content, but we're seeing a lot of this mixture of truly live, time shifted, VOD, different consumption habits depending on what you want to do. And again, it's just speaking back to that imagination point.
You know, one thing to think about when you're thinking of live versus on demand, you know, many times on a live event, your audience isn't going, you know, you may get 1 million views on your YouTube video, and you may have 1,000 viewers of your live event, or 15, 20,000, depending on the event. But those viewers of that live event are in some ways tastemakers. You know, they're the ones that are going to share your on-demand content. And so you're kind of building up your network of promoters during that live event. And then they go out and they want to be first. They want to be they're the type of people that want to be the first comment on a YouTube video, you know, and so, you know, what we've seen is that live audience is your fanatical fan base, and then they're the ones that go out and share. So like we work with the NBA Development League, and they do their live games, and then they share videos on YouTube, and that's what they've seen is those rabid fans of the, you know, Austin Spurs, you know, some big play happens, they're watching live and they're trying to get that, they want to get those clips shared quickly so that those fans can now share it, drive more traffic, and create more advertising revenue. So, you know, some people are disappointed when they do a live event and it's not 1 million viewers. But, you know, if you have a really engaged small audience on that live webcast, it can lead to a lot of views after the fact.
Yeah, and another thing to speak on this point. sorry to jump in, but a lot of brands these days, like if you look at any YouTube star, Twitch star, or any of these kinds of, you know, social media stars, video stars, whatever, there's a cadence during which they're releasing content, right? It's like, I'm streaming this time every week or every day, or I'm releasing a new video at this time every week. And as that pertains to kind of live events, what we tell a lot of our clients is you should turn on the camera, or you should release a new piece of content on a weekly basis so that that live audience kind of grows. You kind of seed it with that base of evangelists, right? Really make them core. And then from that point onward, all the VODs and all the things you're doing after that are kind of filtering people back into that channel. And over time, that's how you really grow a consistent audience and viewership.
So one thing that's interesting is they used to be YouTube was like the big gorilla and it dominated everything. And that has completely changed. The latest reports is 75% of videos are happening outside of YouTube. And that's a very significant number. And there is the serving of content, but I think that what talks a lot about the audience and capturing all the things you have been saying has to do with behavior analysis and real-time analytics. And that's an area where I think platforms have evolved the most and is perhaps the most significant shift from just streaming video. So, for example, I know that Gavin, Nathan, Wes can all of you guys at the panel can talk about this, but in no particular order, Wes, I don't know if with your experience with influxes, can you get us started with behavior analysis and analytics, real-time analytics in your platform, for example?
Yeah, I can try. So I mean, we do a lot of experiential type stuff. So the analytics, you know, the key performance indicators are a little harder to measure, but at the same time, it's you know, they can usually be a lot more valuable. You know, you may have, like with a traditional, you know, event or, you know, video campaign, you may have tons of total views or unique views, impressions, what have you. But you know, how really valuable was that? You know, can't really say. I mean, I never really, you know, I don't click ad banners. But when you have these really cool, you know, interactive, like immersive experiences, where it may not be as scalable and you may not have as many people participating, but the value of those experiences are, you know, way more valuable, in my opinion. We did a project with San Pellegrino where through a Facebook application, it's called 3 Minutes in Italy. So you wait in line through Facebook, and the more social media reposts and retweets and likes you had, the higher you ascend through the queue to be able to control this robot on the Segway platform, which was out in Taormina, Italy, with a tablet mounted, so you kind of, it was like a remote, you know, telepresence kind of experience. I forgot where I was going with this.
All
Anyways,
right, we can
welcome
come
to
back.
the
Come
club.
sit over here with Phil.
Come
and
sit
we'll
over
back
here in
to
the
you.
kids
So
section.
I remember now. So yeah, I mean, for the brand, you know, it was hard to, you know, have like, here's the analytics, here's all the success metrics. That was hard to do because we only have so many people that could control those robots and stuff. But that it got so much press, and it was such a cool story and never been done before. And you know, they got, you know, more than the ROI that they expected. So yeah.
So thank you for coming back to that.
Yeah.
Nathan,
Yeah.
what do you want to add on that?
Well, our most important analytics right now are happening off-site. You know, we have the on-site engagement metrics that you know, are pretty fundamental, but it's all moot if you don't get audience. And if you have a destination website, that like dedicated audience is definitely shrinking. There's really outsized influence with Facebook and Apple and Google right now. So the things we look closely at is how we play ball with them. Those relationships are really important. You know, we talk about the democratization of the ability to create content, and that's true, and that's great. But especially as video or any type of content becomes more and more valuable, the people who can actually control who the audience is and what they see are definitely doing that. You know, the experience on Facebook that you have is not organic. You're not seeing, you know, all the things your friends are sharing or the brands you follow. They're privileging more and more the video content from people they have partnerships with. So That's the thing we're really tracking. It can be frustrating. You can kind of feel like a kid on the playground getting kicked around a lot because, I mean, they really do control these things, but you've got to work with them and you've got to figure out how it is that they're influencing who sees your content.
Right.
And I think the key in there is you have to acquire that knowledge. You have to learn about your users. You have to learn about what makes them work, because once you find that out, there's many venues and avenues that you can follow to cultivate your audience. So Gavin, you probably deal with this more than anybody.
Yeah, I think certainly, and I've heard it actually a few times this week about, KPIs driving creative. And my history was on the creative side, and they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I actually like to say that limitation is the mother of creativity. So I actually don't have a problem with some of the KPIs, helping guide the creative, because in the end of the day, those KPIs are telling you what your audience wants. But one other thing that I did want to say about KPIs is that sometimes you have to be creative in creating the KPIs, because the KPIs are actually telling the story of your platform or your content. So and as things change, the old KPIs aren't as relevant anymore. Even so, I still think time on site and page views and stuff like that is important. But some of the things that we looked at were like clicks to unmute, right? So if you have a video that's playing and someone unmutes that video, I mean, we just invented that because for us it was important at one point, but I think that's an interesting kind of dynamic to look at. Also, some people monitor scroll depth, which I really like. And then there's the one KPI that I think is very important for everyone, and that's one I invented this morning. It's called POV, which is pissed off viewers, right? And I think that in everything that we do, I think that's a really important KPI to be aware of in everything. So, that's my 2 cents on KPIs.
Thank you. And you want to add
Yeah,
something?
I mean, there's another side of it too, which goes to, I think it's rapidly changing, which is engagement. And it used to be, I got 1 million, Twitter followers. And I think people are rapidly discovering that just because you have 1 million Twitter followers doesn't mean that they're going to follow you beyond that content they enjoy.
Right.
And, a like is another kind of, it's a type of engagement. It's useful. And, a comment is a better one. A video comment is an even better one. And looking at the nature of what engagement means, because it's changing rapidly. And I think it's why Twitter is going through the changes that they're going through right now. It
Yeah.
goes to the level
Right.
of what engagement is and how we define it. And video, all of us, the different ways we're serving it, is changing that.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and to your point, that 1 million followers doesn't really necessarily mean engagement, is, apps get downloaded all the time because most of the time are free, but more than 80% of people who download an app never open it or open it once or twice, and that's it. So that's, a wasted opportunity. And I think the same can be said about video and content and advertisement in general. You have again, we go back to the 10 seconds, you have a very small amount of time to make your point. So towards that end, how do you measure really engagement? Let's talk for a moment about that. For example, David, in your platform, people go take classes, but do they finish it? How do you measure engagement? Do they finish? And I think it's one of the things you asked at the beginning of the...
Yeah. We do not look at POV, but that's a really good metric to start thinking about. So we look at how many people have gone through the entire class. But actually, one metric that I think is just cool, and I would think that we're going to see more of, is so we, in real time, look at what parts of the video somebody decides to actually stop watching. And you can clearly see when a joke does not land, because all of a sudden, everybody just stops watching it, right? You also can see when the joke lands, everybody watches it again, right? So we actually we then update the class and re-edit the class based off of those patterns. And I guess I'm a little surprised that you still haven't seen that a lot yet on Netflix or on Amazon Prime, because I think now you actually could update a show, right? Like, I don't know how many folks in this room watch Narcos, right? So I just watch all of it, and there are parts in the middle that like start to kind of wane, and I bet that they lose a bunch of people to it. And if I was working on that show, I would probably cut that, or I would actually I'd recut it. And I think we don't necessarily have to have in the past, because everything was live, you had to watch. You almost got the exact same experience, but now I think you could recut and re-edit based on stats.
So I know I see some hands going up. We're definitely going to have questions and answers at the end of the panel, and I'll make sure to have plenty of time for that. But again, just staying for a moment with measuring engagement, like back to you, Nathan, or you, Ari, who I think want to add something. How are you measuring engagement? Because you have such a wide range of, from events to news to other commercials, or how are you measuring engagement?
Well, definitely the importance of like more than just a second view. That's a great thing. I mean, the inflection points that you were talking about are things we're trying to get more sophisticated about. Some of our great video content is almost like feature-length television episode, these roundtables with celebrities and really interesting people. But at the same time, we're trying to look closely at when we keep audience, when we lose audience. We're also playing around with, I think, some aesthetic choices that you typically didn't see or consider to be great video. The way younger audiences in particular are using mobile, they have a they're not deterred by like a vertical video. Like typically there's been these really great aspect ratios for video that are an entirely different format than that. But a lot of the app platforms like Snapchat are seeing higher completion engagement rates around those vertical video experiences that people are really used to. So that's a tough sell to our video production team because they create beautiful.
It's a tougher sell to advertisers.
Yeah. But those are sort of the things we're looking at, like themes, what hooks people, where do you lose people, video length, even if it starts as a entirely longish type of feature, how do you cut that up? Definitely the type of stuff we're looking at.
Okay.
So the way that we look at this is, again, speaking to each brand, I'll use that kind of loosely. Each content creator, each content brand, they might have their own KPIs, right? So what we do is we provide you the toolkit. So for example, you can like send a curated tweet or a poll or a trivia question, and different customers use different pieces, right? And they have their own KPIs about what matters to them. Some customers don't use polls at all because they don't want that engagement that way. Some customers don't use chat. Some customers really want to drive e-commerce transactions through their video. Okay, that's fine. You choose what's going to be relevant for you. And the way that our technology is crafted is as soon as you send out an overlay over the video, in real time you can see how many people saw it and what percentage engaged. So you have a pretty immediate feedback loop to tell how well that worked with your audience, and then you can adjust that over time to be more effective in that way. So that's kind of how we look at that.
All right, thank you. Some other interesting numbers that I can share with everybody is that there's many ways of advertisement on the web and on TV and whatnot, but 80% of users recall watching at least a video as part of an advertising campaign. From that 80%, 75% took some action. They either seek more information, they visited a website, they visited the company that represented the product or service that was being presented, and even 12% actually purchased something. That's how effective video is as compared to other media. And if anybody wants a PowerPoint that is not working today for some reason, I'll be happy to email it to you. But I think those numbers are very compelling. And it takes us to the part of the conversation talks about how do we distribute, how do we monetize, how do we further our individual causes. So Nathan, you alluded about working, with companies like Facebook and Google and others. So how do you facilitate collaboration between marketeers and content creators? How do you see that?
Well, we're trying to look at the entire picture of where our content goes, and that's changing our KPIs as well. So personally, I think the value of our business is moving offsite and in that direction. So anytime there's new opportunities in that space, we try to get into those early. When Facebook is doing something like instant articles or video, we're an early stage partner with Apple News. The newest iPhones are going to have probably 500 million native installs of that news. So for us, it won't make sense to make a Hollywood Reporter standalone news app anymore. We need to be over there, and we need to be taking full advantage of that. Those are big partners we can work with, and those are what we're focusing on more, as opposed to like service type agencies who say they can do great things for us through marketing.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm a very big fan of brand content. I think brands that are doing brand content right are producing some of the most entertaining stuff that there is. Again, American Express, HP, many brands on YouTube that produce really cool stuff. I think there is something on the ad tech side that there's some innovation there which is lacking, and that is using content and advertising together. So in a traditional situation where you have a pre-roll and then you have a piece of video content, high quality video content, if you can manage to get a relevant or complementary piece of video content to play after a well-produced ad, then all of a sudden your ad buy is not a 30-second ad buy, but it's a 3-minute ad buy. So if I give you an example, let's say you have a magnificent TV spot for Dove. Dove did some great TV spots for women's soaps and self-confidence. And then you put that next to a piece of content from The Good Wife or something like that, where you've got a really powerful woman standing up, arguing her case. All of a sudden, that moment that the advertiser created in 30 seconds and spent a lot of money and time on has been amplified by the video content that comes after it. Now, today at scale in the ad networks, that cooperation doesn't exist. You can't do that technically. But I think that's something that can really, really change that moment and make it more acceptable for the people online to watch it. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. So.
All right, continuing with the theme, we'll come back to him when it comes back to him. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think something that as a marketer or a content creator or a publisher, you have to, everybody wants to tell the viewer to watch in the way that they want them to. That may not have made sense, but you have to really think about how does your customer, how does your viewer want to consume your content? And just because you want them to go to your website, that doesn't mean that's where they're going to go. And they may not go when you want them to. And I think in the social wars, Facebook has won. Anybody that, how many people use Google Plus? Zero. But, and then Facebook's just announced that the site-wide search, and I don't know if you've played around with that, but you can go now and you can search, for whatever, and it's not just, their search has really upped their game. And so, any company or any network that's not looking at the strategy of how do you reach your customers on Facebook, I think you're gonna be behind if you don't look at that now, because that's where people are consuming content. I mean, half of the news that I read is shared by someone I know. And I know them, I know their angles, I know why they're sharing it, and so you have more respect for that curated content, because that's something that's a recurring theme is, who's curating the news, who's curating the videos you watch, and it's usually, not the way that every company dreams it would be. It's going to be somebody that I know is sharing this cat video, but anyway, I mean, I just wanted to throw that out there for food for thought, because you can build a portal, you can build a site, but if you're not where the viewer is, then you don't get them ever. Whether even Flipboard and all these different apps that aggregate all this news, and you can curate your own experience. And it is a cool time to be a consumer of content, because There's so much of it, and it's harder to find, but with social, it makes it easier to find stuff that's relevant for you.
We're going to go to questions for all of those on the audience who have been patiently waiting, but just 1 second before we do that. There is the aspect of channels, of categorizing things, and in accounting for different platforms like mobile versus computer. I just wanted some final thoughts on that, perhaps from Ari and Wes, or I don't know, Andrew, if you want to add something to that, because you do have a diversity of devices and a diversity of in a very diverse public. And going to piggybacking on what Philip was saying, there is a relevance. You can't just put any content with anything. It doesn't matter even if they're great properties. If they don't mix together, it's a missed opportunity. So in terms of channels, you guys who are working in the platforms, anything that anybody wants to add before we go into our very patient audience waiting for ask questions?
Not to rile anyone up in here or whatever, it seems to be my role in this group.
But
I
hate video.
I strongly advise people to not move too far in the direction of just only having your content be on Facebook or other sources like that, because you lose your identity and you're subject to their changing platform algorithms, and I don't think that's a good long-term strategic move for your brand. I think you just become marginalized, right? If you're just Hollywood Reporter on Apple News and there's like a million other news sources, me as a consumer, I might not be able to differentiate your content. You might not have me as a viewer, after a certain amount of time. You might be just marginalized, I guess. And so I think it's important to proceed along a dual-pronged strategy. You should continue to have your content be available in different sources, have that be a feed into your brand, but then you should cultivate your core audience. Don't disregard them. Right, your core audience probably isn't the audience looking at you on Facebook. So understand that there's different market segments, and you should market to them differently.
And I think if I want to add something to that. It really, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. They're all great, and you have to look at it for what they are. You have to figure out how to use them to advance your platform, but not advance your platform, because you're absolutely right. If all of a sudden you just move over to one thing, you run the risk of disappearing or diluting. So it really use the technology to enhance what you're doing, and use your conviction to stay with the platform and the content that you're developing, and see everything else as a tool or an enabler to reach more people. A final, please.
You wanted to fight, and I can't give it to you because I agree 100%. And about the time we came out, an app called Meerkat came out, and it was totally dependent on Twitter's API. And Twitter looked at that and said, "Oh, snip," and they changed their API.
During South by Southwest in the height of the launch, and it was like, it was weird to see a technology skyrocket and fall within 24 hours.
Yeah, precisely.
And but then, they raised cash before.
Of course, they did. Literally like a day before. And then, Periscope comes out, which looks a lot like Meerkat. And so it's more than just you want to establish your brand. You don't want to be dependent upon someone that's going to look at your success and go, "Oh," right? So that, there's a lot in that.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for being so patient. So on the second row, you wanted to ask a question, and you've been patiently waiting. So please.
This panel's fabulous. Thank you so much. My name's Jill Jarris. I'm an actor filmmaker. I own a company called Gotta Laugh Entertainment, and I have a feature that's doing quite well on Amazon and Google Play and Vimeo. Now, what I want to be doing, like by March of this year, is I want to do my own web series of Simply Amazing Comedy. And I would like advice, like Mr. Nelson said about finding your viewer, where's your viewer? Any advice that you can give me on how to do this, I would appreciate very much.
I'll just, the playbook of the famous YouTubers is working very well. I'm on the advisory board for VidCon, so I get to see a lot of how they succeed, and it's really, one of the things is collaboration. You team up with somebody who's doing something similar, and you help co-promote. You also get involved in discussions on other things similar to what you're doing, so that you now are building up a credibility in that group, and then when you do your thing, you share it, and now you have that audience driving to you. It's not like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. It's like launching a Kickstarter campaign and you get $0 because you don't promote it. Kickstarter doesn't raise any money for you. They just give you a vehicle to tell all your friends to kick in. And I think it's the same thing with shows. I mean, you have to get in. My view is you have to get involved in a community and then help that community build your audience.
Ari, you wanted to add something to that?
Sure. So I think, speaking to the last point, what are the ways that you're fostering that community, your viewers that are watching on those different sources? How are you pulling them together? Where's the basis of that conversation? I think if you think clearly about where you want to focus that and message it correctly to your audience, start to cultivate them there, that's really going to help you as you continue to develop. And also, with web series, it's a great idea to have like a synchronized view for that. And that's something I can talk to you about after this.
Oh, great. Yes.
Way in the back.
Hi, Deputy Secretary, great panel. Question, Facebook's coming out with their video-specific app on mobile.
Yeah.
I think that in general, like you mentioned Facebook search, I'm curious if Facebook's going to move more towards the direction of YouTube, where you could like search anything in the search bar and like find a video in the archive. But then also, like, how is this going to look like on TV sets? Like, we know YouTube's been on TV sets for a long time. Is Facebook apps coming to the new Apple TV or to Roku or anything like that? Because it seems like there's a long-term play that's eventually going to be made there.
Anyone?
On the first part, the answer is yes. I mean, you'll even see now in the stream, if you post a clip and it's not hosted on Facebook, you are not going to get as many likes and views, right? So I think they're definitely going to try to be an aggregate on the video side. On the TV side, that is like much messier. I mean, I feel unqualified to.
Sure, I can speak to this a little. So I think with Apple TV about to come out in the App Store, so this is like a month away, I think everything's going to change. TV manufacturers like Samsung have gotten it wrong for a really long time. I think Apple's going to get it right. And I think that you're going to see a lot more channels start to develop their own identities, like channel apps, right? And that's something we're actually trying to do, is provide the infrastructure so that content creators can create their own Apple TV apps. So yes, you're going to see Facebook go into that space, of course. The search bar is going to play out the way you're thinking. They want to control search and take that business away from Google. It's pretty obvious. But I think there is still room for channels to have their own identities and for you to skip Facebook and skip Netflix and go straight to the content you want with a dedicated app on your TV.
Yeah, and I think the advertising part of that is, and there was a panel just across the way which started to talk about it today. I actually see very quickly people being served, programmatic ads on their TVs, especially through the OTT boxes, and I actually think it's a good thing. The same ad break at your place won't be what it is at my place, and I think that's going to be a really good thing. I think advertisers are going to probably produce more ads, but I think they're going to be targeted, and we always said that the real advantage of the internet was that we could target specific users with advertising that's from the advertising point of view. And I think when it happens on your TV set at home, at the very least you won't have to sit through a bunch of commercials you don't like. Right? At the very least you'll be able to sit through commercials that make sense to you. I think that's going to be a big innovation, and I think it's probably, and this is just me guessing, it's probably going to be happen quicker than we think.
I believe so. It's going to happen quicker because the tools to measure and respond in real time are there, and the ability to personalize content we have had for a long time, the ability to send different things. All we really need to know from a technology perspective is who you are. and have a profile on you, and if we have a profile, we know what to serve. I know I'm oversimplifying it, and some engineers in my office are going like, really? But it is something that is here now. It's already being tested, and the question is there's more legal issues and platform and business issues to resolve than actual technology issues.
That profile, though, is really interesting. I mean, that's one of the huge advantages Facebook has. They don't have to put a bunch of ad code on their page to realize that profile. You've already told them who you are and all the things you like. So
that's where the
they're
genius
in a great
lies.
position. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also on that, and you mentioned Apple TV, I think that's going to have, hands down, the biggest impact on Hollywood in a very, very long time.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
When you say the new Apple TV coming out.
So Apple TV is basically, it's the ability for all kinds of apps that you can control using your phone to watch your TV, right?
How's
So
it different from the Apple TV I've had for a couple of years?
it's better.
Well,
It's more advanced, right?
For the first time, developers can build their own
Right.
apps. There's going to be a TV app store, just like your phone app store.
So each one of us can build a channel.
So they're given the SDK for developers to build their own channels.
Right. So now I can get my Showtime channel, my HBO channel, my Weave channel, any one of our products' channels. And those are siloed, highly siloed places. And, and that really changes everything. And I think Apple is about to do to Hollywood what they did to the music industry. And we all thought it happened already, but it hasn't.
So to your initial question, you'll have your own channel on Apple TV.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so there you go.
It's a pig. I only want HBO and I don't want everything else that comes in that package.
Yeah, and you just
Pick that.
Mm-hmm.
There might be apps that are games. There
Yeah.
might be apps.
It's not like you just chose what your bundle was. I think it's mainly your TV is now a big iPad.
Yes, that is.
Bingo. That's
But,
exactly it.
yeah, so you can develop whatever kind of app you
That's
want.
an
They could be
interesting way to
games,
put
They
it.
could be,
So-
anything that's relevant.
So to answer the Facebook question, they're going to obviously have an app at some point delivering a lot of video, and you're going to use Facebook differently on your phone as you do on your computer, as you do on your TV, and they're going to be serving that in a very big way, which is why they're now the new CBS, ABC, the new network, in a different age.
Do you have a question? You raise your hand a little bit. No? Okay. All right. Do you have a?
I'm
Please, go
curious.
ahead.
I am a writer, and I've written a lot of television, and I think you're right, it is changing. I mean, when I started in sitcoms, it was like 24 minutes, and then 22 minutes, and so this 12-minute segment sounds, I don't know how we're going to create stories for that. It's very hard to create a 12-minute story, unless you have time.
I'm sure you can do it. I'm positive you can do
There's
it.
a show called High Maintenance on Vimeo. It's 6-minute episodes, and they're incredibly rich and dense with material.
Well, that's where it's going to go. I mean, I'm astounded. I have nieces and nephews and a daughter and son, and there's been a huge split because my daughter is 14, and her cousin who's 2 years older and those above are all still on Facebook. My daughter and my son won't touch Facebook because that's over for them.
Yeah.
Right, but I think you'll find, every quarter, Freewheel do a report on video consumption, video and advertising consumption patterns. And what's interesting is that long format video on mobile devices isn't going down.
Yeah.
If people are still, it amazes me because I like to go to the movies, right? But a lot of people, a lot of your daughters and my daughters are consuming 30-minute shows on their iPhones. So first of all, I'm sure you're going to have a job for quite a while. But second of all, I think it's just horses for courses. I think some shows stories will be told better in chunks of 6 minutes, and some stories will be told better in 30-minute chunks.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be capped. I think you're going to now have the freedom to actually decide how long you want it to be. So I know on Bloodline for Netflix, they actually think about it as the average person on Netflix. They usually watch about 1.5 episodes at a time. So for Bloodline, they're thinking, hey, how do I make a story? a story that's going to span an episode and a half, right? Or how do I mean, ideally, how do you change it so that the episode does last an hour and a half, right? So so that you stop having these arbitrary stops, right?
But that's like Sherlock on BBC.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
And part of the reason is just these phones are getting so much bigger. I mean, can you even call it a phone anymore? It's like they're almost like tablets, and that helps with the viewing of the long videos.
So
Battery life.
it's going to have to be the last question because we're running a little.
Really quickly then, high maintenance was a really good thing to bring up because the CEO of Vimeo, I talked to him about that, and this would help you to know that they just made their own web series. They're up in Portland, these guys, and they're funny and they're talented, and they did it for 2 cents, and they got a lot of audience and traction, and then Vimeo saw that, the way YouTube years ago saw that, and said, oh, now we're going to be in original content. And just FYI, they're looking for more original content.
Yep.
So
Okay.
Vimeo,
It's the content wars.
Yep.
So one last question. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna add that I know Periscope was bought for like 100 million, and I think they didn't come out of beta yet, right? To your point earlier.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there was huge value in the ability to just stream endless amounts of content. There are big problems with it too, but we could have had this whole, one-way push of this content, and you guys could have been anywhere in the world. Or we could have shared this with a lot more people using it. And we don't need the camera in the back of the room anymore. Quite honestly, the person in the front with a decent phone would have done it just fine.
So we have tried to cover a lot of ground in this panel, and an hour and change is a very short time. We have a gentleman in the back has one question. Let's make that the last question.
Years ago, I produced a series called All American Style, which was a series
Love American Style. Just to you.
It shows anything. For 30 minutes, we sometimes have plans. When we shot a show, we never knew what the most people would do. The great advantage we had was we could cut it so that it played the best. And if it was really good, we could go a little longer. And if it was not so good, we could put it in the closet and save it for Christmas Eve. But it allows you to not be, have the time dictated. You do what works. And we had a 32 share.
I'm surprised that's not more of a model today.
Well, we're moving that
I
way.
keep telling my son this.
Your grandson will get it.
So I know that perhaps many of you have particular questions. Any one of our panelists could have done a whole hour by themselves and what they're doing and share with you more of their experience. I want to encourage you to come to the podium and ask them questions directly and engage with them. I want to thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
I know it's been hard to get enough time for 7 people at once. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
What was the name of the series?
That was a great panel.